The iron door of the Marinwood County Jail made a nasty, rattling sound. Maverick Thorne shuddered. He'd been used to that sound for 20 years, but today it meant something special. Freedom. Maverick took a deep breath. The April air was as heady as expensive whiskey. He ran his hand through the prickly hedgehog of his gray hair, trying to get used to the idea that no one else would tell him when to sleep, eat, or shower. He was wearing a simple pair of jeans and a white t-shirt, the clothes they gave to all those who were released. In his hands was a tattered bag with a few personal belongings, a driver's license with a photo of a 29-year-old man who looked at the camera with a confident smile. Who was this man? Maverick couldn't remember anymore. The prison guard who had escorted him to the exit coughed awkwardly. "Good luck to you, Thorne. Try not to come back." Maverick nodded silently. He didn't plan on coming back. He had other plans. He walked slowly down the road that led from the prison to the bus stop. Memories of the day his life had been turned upside down flashed through his mind. It had been an ordinary Tuesday 20 years ago. He had come home earlier than usual to surprise Octavia. They were celebrating their 5th wedding anniversary. Octavia wasn't home. A call to her cell phone went unanswered. He decided to wait for her, opened a bottle of wine. When the doorbell rang at 2 a.m., he was sure it was her, but there were policemen on the doorstep. "Maverick Thorne?" one of them asked. "You are under arrest for the rape of Octavia Thorne." The world around him collapsed. His words that he had not seen his wife for days had not been heeded. The evidence was there. The bruises on Octavia's body, her testimony, some evidence of a struggle in their bedroom. Maverick didn't know how to explain it. At the trial, Octavia had looked at him with blank eyes, telling him how he had beaten and raped her for the past few months, how she was afraid and couldn't leave. That day, she said, she had finally decided to run away, and he had caught her, beaten, and raped her. He didn't understand why she was lying. Their marriage wasn't perfect, but he had never raised a hand to her. Yet the judge and jury believed her. 20 years. That was the sentence. The bus came to a stop, bringing Maverick back to the present. He climbed inside, handed the driver the crumpled bill he'd gotten with his clothes. It wasn't much money. He'd been working in the prison library for the last 5 years, saving every dime. It would be enough for the first time. 40 minutes later, he pulled up outside an old motel on the outskirts of River City, a small town 2 hours from the prison. It was here that they had arranged to meet Griffin. Griffin Hayes was his only friend in prison. A short, wiry man with shrewd eyes and absolute calmness in any situation they had met in the library, where Griffin spent most of his free time. He had once been a literature teacher until he got 25 years for rape. Like Maverick, he claimed to be innocent. Unlike most prisoners, Maverick believed him. Griffin was released a month ago. That's when they arranged to meet. Maverick walked into the motel and gave his name to the desk clerk. He handed him the key to room 27. Griffin was waiting for him in the room. He had been out of prison for a month, his prison pallor gone, his clothes decent, and his haircut new. He hugged Maverick tightly. "Finally, brother. It's good to see you." Maverick smiled involuntarily. After so many years surrounded by people he couldn't trust, the presence of a friend was a breath of fresh air. "You're looking good, Griff. Freedom is good for you." Griffin shrugged. "It wasn't easy at first, but I had a plan, and I followed it." "I suppose you have a plan too?" Maverick nodded, pulling a tattered notebook out of the bag. "For 20 years, this is all I've thought about what I'm going to do when I get out." "What's that?" Griffin's eyes showed genuine interest. "I want to find her first. See how she lives, and then—" Maverick was silent, not wanting to say aloud what he planned to do to Octavia. Griffin nodded understandingly. "I can help. I've settled in a little this month. I'm working in a bookstore. The owner wasn't afraid to hire an ex-convict. I got an apartment, even a car. It's old, but it runs." He put his hand on Maverick's shoulder. "Stay with me until you get back on your feet. And I found out something about her." Maverick tensed. "What was it?" "She's Octavia Sterling now. Married some architect, Brock Sterling. He's 33. They live in Lakewood. It's a suburb just north of here." Maverick felt something tighten inside. Despite all these years, the thought of her being with someone else hurt. "How do you know?" Griffin smiled. "The internet works wonders. I also have an acquaintance who works in the archives of the local newspaper. Octavia's an important person now. Runs a charity for victims of domestic violence. Ironic, isn't it?" Maverick gritted his teeth. She'd built her career on lying about him. Stole his life, and now she's making herself look like a hero. "Do you have her address?" Griffin nodded. "Keep in mind, This is a wealthy neighborhood. Security, cameras, the works. Doesn't stop me. Over the next few days, Maverick settled into Griffin's small apartment. Though modest in size, it felt like a palace after his prison cell. The first shower without a guard outside the door, the first food he could eat whenever he wanted, the first night in a regular bed, it was intoxicating freedom. Meanwhile, he was researching information about Octavia, and her new husband Brock Sterling was a rising star at the architectural firm Epsilon Design. He was winning competitions. His designs were being published in magazines. Octavia, for her part, was regularly featured in local newspapers as an organizer of perfect couple charity events. On the 7th day of his freedom, Maverick was ready for his first foray. Griffin had lent him his car, an old gray Ford, inconspicuous enough for surveillance. "Be careful," Griffin admonished him. "Don't do anything stupid, just watch for now." Maverick nodded, though a storm raged inside him. For 20 years, he'd waited for this moment, the moment when he'd see again the woman who'd taken his life. The Sterling house was on a hill, surrounded by similarly wealthy homes. A 2-story mansion with panoramic windows and spacious grounds. Maverick parked 2 blocks away and walked to the house, trying to look like a normal passerby. He found a seat on a park bench across the street from their street, pulled his cap over his eyes and waited. At exactly 9 o'clock in the morning, a silver BMW drove out of the gate. Behind the wheel was a young man. Must be Brock. Maverick scrutinized him through the viewfinder of his compact binoculars. A neat haircut, an expensive suit, a cocky smile. At noon, the gates opened again. This time, a white Lexus drove out of them. Maverick tensed. There was a woman behind the wheel. Even from a distance, he recognized Octavia. She hadn't changed much over the years. The same brown hair arranged in an elegant style. The same clean lines on her face. Maybe there were a few wrinkles near her eyes, but it was hard to see from a distance. She looked successful, confident, happy. The thought made me sick to my stomach. While he'd been rotting in prison, she'd been enjoying life, building a career, marrying a rich, handsome man. Not a trace of remorse or guilt. Maverick followed her to a downtown building with a sign that read, "Catherine Smith Foundation for Victims of Violence." He didn't go inside, but he wrote down the address. It would come in handy later. The next day, he returned to the Sterling house, now in the evening. Through the panoramic windows of the living room, he could see that Octavia and Brock were hosting guests. 6 or 7 people, all in expensive outfits, carrying glasses of wine. They were laughing, talking. Maverick watched Octavia closely. The way she moved, the way she touched her new husband, the way she threw back her head, laughing at someone's joke. He didn't notice how he clenched his fists so hard his nails dug into his palms. For 20 years, he'd slept on a hard bunk, eaten bad food, endured humiliation from guards and other prisoners. And she drank expensive wine and laughed in her posh home. During the week, Maverick studied Octavia and Brock's daily routine. Brock left for work at 9, returning at 7. Octavia traveled to her foundation 3 times a week, went to the spa on Tuesdays, and met her friends at the Lavender Beach restaurant on Thursdays. One day, while watching the house from across the street, Maverick noticed that Octavia suddenly turned around and looked directly in his direction. He quickly looked away, but his heart beat faster. Did she recognize him? Hardly. He had changed a lot over the years, and the distance was considerable. That evening, he told Griffin of his observations. They were living as if nothing had happened. "She's built her reputation on lying about me." Griffin listened in silence, only nodding occasionally. Finally, he asked, "And what do you plan to do next?" Maverick looked him straight in the eye. "I want her to confess. I want to hear from her lips why she did it. And then..." He paused. "I want her to feel what I've felt all these years. Helplessness. Despair. Hopelessness. Are you sure that's what you want?" Griffin asked quietly. "Think hard. If you go down this path, there's no turning back." Maverick sighed. "And I don't have one anyway. What have I got to lose? 20 years of my life already lost." Griffin looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "I'm with you, whatever you decide. But remember, revenge is a dish served cold. Don't be in a hurry." Meanwhile, Octavia was really starting to feel uneasy. Several times she felt like someone was watching her. Once at the supermarket, she suddenly turned around, certain that someone was watching her from behind a rack of canned goods. Another time, she thought the same gray Ford had been parking outside her office for the 3rd day. That evening, she shared her concerns with Brock. Honey, don't you think it's strange that man is always sitting in the park across the street from our house? Brock pulled away from his laptop and looked at her in surprise. What man? The one with the cap and the dark jacket. I don't know. Maybe I'm paranoid, but I think he's watching our house. Brock walked over and gave her a hug. You need to work less, honey. That foundation of yours is taking up too much of your energy. Why don't we make a weekend of it? Shall we go to the lake on Friday? Octavia smiled uncertainly. Maybe you're right. I just need to rest. But the worry didn't leave her, especially after she had received a strange letter. Unsigned, just a piece of paper that read, "The truth always comes out." She didn't show the letter to Brock. She didn't want to bother him, but her thoughts kept returning to the past, to the events of 20 years ago, the lies that had changed her life. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she knew it was retribution. It was coming, and she couldn't escape it. Octavia's body was discovered by her housekeeper, Maria Gonzalez, early Monday morning. The woman arrived at 8 in the morning as usual and rang the doorbell. No one answered. She used her key and entered the house, calling out to the owners. The silence alarmed her. Usually by this time, Mr. Sterling had had breakfast before work, and Mrs. Sterling was downstairs in her robe to drink her morning coffee. Mary walked through the living room, noting the mess, a broken glass, an overturned vase of flowers. In the dining room, 2 glasses of unfinished wine and the remains of dinner stood on the table. Climbing the wide staircase to the second floor, she made her way to the master bedroom. The door was ajar. Maria knocked, but got no answer. She cautiously peeked inside and cried out. On the bed lay Octavia, her throat slit. The blood had soaked into the expensive silk linens. The woman's eyes were wide open, horror frozen in them. A few feet from the bed, Brock lay on the floor. His head was bashed in, a dark puddle spreading around him. Maria ran out of the room, went downstairs, and with shaking hands dialed 911. Police! Come quickly! They're dead! They're both dead! 20 minutes later, the Sterling house was filled with police. The area was cordoned off. Patrols were set up. Neighbors were interviewed. Detective Leighton Wrighton arrived 40 minutes after the first call. A tall man of 41 with piercing gray eyes and light gray on his temples, he had a reputation as one of the best homicide investigators in the department. In 15 years of service, he had solved over 100 crimes, many of which seemed hopeless. He parked his inconspicuous black sedan at the gate and approached the officer on duty at the entrance. Detective Wrighton, he introduced himself, showing his badge. What do we have? The young policeman nodded respectfully. Double homicide, sir. Victims are Octavia Sterling, 47, and her husband Brock Sterling, 33. The bodies were discovered by the housekeeper at approximately 8:15 this morning. Wrighton nodded and entered the house. Inside, the forensic experts were busy photographing the crime scene, taking fingerprints, collecting blood samples. Wrighton went up to the bedroom where the bodies were. The chief medical examiner, Dr. Alice Cheng, was already examining them. What do you think, Alice? Wrighton asked quietly, stepping closer. The woman looked away from her notes. The time of death was between 10 p.m. and midnight. The woman's cause of death was a slit throat, a single deep cut with a sharp object, presumably a knife. The man died of blunt force trauma to the head, possibly a heavy statue or something similar. Wrighton glanced around the bedroom. There were reading glasses and a book on the bedside table, and house slippers on the floor beside the bed. There was nothing to indicate preparation for sleep. More likely, they had been interrupted during their evening rest. Signs of a struggle? Alice nodded. Alice. The man had foreign skin and blood under his fingernails and defensive cuts on his hands. He fought back. The woman has bruises on her wrists. She was probably held before her throat was slit. Wrighton walked slowly around the room, careful not to disturb the evidence. Had anything been stolen? One of the officers checking the house answered. The safe in Mr. Sterling's study was untouched. Mrs. Sterling's jewelry is still in place. Electronics, too. This is clearly not a robbery. Wrighton nodded. His intuition told him the same thing. It was personal. Did they have enemies? He asked. The officer shrugged. The neighbors say they were a model couple. She ran a charitable foundation, he a successful architect. Public figures, donated to charity. We all have enemies, Wrighton said thoughtfully. Check everyone they've had conflicts with. Business partners, ex-lovers, competitors. He walked over to Octavia's dressing table. Carefully arranged bottles of perfume, cosmetics, a comb with a few hairs. Next to it was a picture, Octavia and Brock on a yacht, smiling for the camera. How long had they been married? Wrighton asked. 12 years, the officer replied. Wrighton nodded and continued to look around. In the dressing table drawer, he found a stack of letters tied with ribbon. Putting on his gloves, he glanced through them cursorily. The usual correspondence, holiday greetings, cards from friends. Nothing suspicious. Suddenly, an unsigned envelope caught his eye. It contained a piece of paper with the phrase, "The truth always comes out." Wrighton handed the letter to one of the forensics guys. "Check it for prints and analyze the paper." Then he went downstairs and looked around the living room and dining room. Traces of the evening meal, 2 glasses of wine, a broken vase. In the kitchen trash can, he found receipts from Portofino's restaurant. The couple had dined there the night before, at 8 o'clock, according to the date and time. Wrighton stepped out onto the terrace. The day was clear, and the backyard overlooked the lake. The perfect place to live, and for death. He went back inside and turned to his assistant, a young detective named Jason Clark. "I need complete information on both victims. Check previous marriages, if any. Financial status, insurance, wills, standard procedure." Over the next few hours, Wrightson's team spent the next few hours gathering information on the victims. By late afternoon, the first case meeting was held at the police office. "So, what have we got?" Wrighton began, looking at the assembled detectives. Jason Clark spoke first. "Octavia Sterling, née Baker, 47 years old, born in St. Louis, moved here 23 years ago, married twice, first marriage to Maverick Thorne, lasted 5 years, ended after he was convicted of raping her. Got 20 years, interesting point, released only a week ago." Wrighton straightened in his chair. "Repeat the last part." "Octavia Sterling's ex-husband, Maverick Thorne, was convicted of raping her 20 years ago. Got 20 years in prison. He was released last Monday." There was silence in the room. Then Wrighton spoke slowly. "We have a prime suspect. Find him. Now." 2 hours later, the police had all the information they needed on Maverick Thorne. When he was released, he listed the apartment of one Griffin Hayes, another ex-con who had been released a month earlier. Neither of them were home. "Put out a bolo on Thorne," Wrighton ordered. "Get his picture out to every patrol officer. Check the security cameras around the Sterling house for the last week. He may have been following them." By the next morning, the police had their first results. Security camera footage from a neighboring house showed a gray Ford belonging to Griffin Hayes on several occasions. Twice the camera caught a man who looked like Maverick Thorne watching the Sterling house from the park across the street. "He was studying their routines," Wrighton muttered, reviewing the footage. A classic case of stalking before an attack. A stakeout of Hayes' apartment had yielded no results. Neither he nor Thorne had shown up. However, they were able to establish that Hayes worked at the Pages bookstore downtown. Wrighton and 2 officers went there. The store was small but cozy. Behind the counter stood an elderly woman. "What can I do for you?" she asked, eyeing Wrighton's police badge suspiciously. "We're looking for Griffin Hayes." The woman frowned. "Griffin hadn't shown up for work in 2 days. Won't answer his cell phone. I was getting worried." "When was the last time you saw him?" "Friday. He worked his shift. Nothing out of the ordinary. Said he was going fishing with a friend of his this weekend." "Friend?" Wrighton was interested. "Did he give a name?" "No. He just said his old buddy had just gotten out of prison and they wanted to celebrate with a fishing trip." Wrighton nodded. "If he shows up or contacts you, please call this number immediately." He handed her his business card. Meanwhile, in the town of Springville, 120 miles from the crime scene, Maverick Thorne sat in a cheap motel room watching the news. His face was on the screen. The police had put him on the wanted list for the murder of Octavia and Brock Sterling. "Shit!" he cursed, turning off the TV. He hadn't realized what had happened. He was at home that night with Griffin. They drank whiskey and discussed plans for revenge, but it never came to concrete action. In the morning, Griffin had said he had to go away on business, and he hadn't returned until the evening, pensive and silent. The next day, the news exploded with reports of a double murder. Griffin immediately suggested leaving. "Just in case," he said. "The police will think of you right away, given your past with her." They quickly packed up and left in Griffin's car. First to Oakville, then to Pinridge, and now to Springville. Griffin insisted they needed to keep moving. He wasn't in his room now. He'd gone to get groceries and new prepaid cell phones. Maverick was getting nervous. What if Griffin didn't come back? What if the police already had him in custody? His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the door opening. Griffin walked in carrying 2 bags from the supermarket. "Did you see the news?" he asked, instead of greeting. Maverick nodded. "We're totally screwed." Griffin shook his head. "You're wanted for a murder you didn't commit. Again. Ironic, isn't it?" Maverick looked at his friend with bewilderment. How could this have happened? I wasn't even near their house that night. Griffin took a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses out of the bag. Shall we have a drink? He suggested. I think we both need it. They drank in silence. Then Maverick asked, What are we going to do? You can't give up, Griffin said firmly. With your past, you'll be found guilty in a heartbeat. We have to find the real killer. And how are we going to do that? Griffin looked out the window thoughtfully. I have an idea, but you might not like it. Meanwhile, Detective Wrighton was studying the case file in his office. He was rereading old transcripts from the Maverick Thorne trial. A standard rape case, the victim's testimony, the medical evidence, the defendant's lack of an alibi. Thorne had gotten 20 years, the maximum sentence. However, something about the case bothered Wrighton. He called his contact at the D.A. S office. Mark, I need a favor. Can you send me the full file on Maverick Thorne's rape conviction? 20 years old. An hour later, the bulky file was on his desk. Wrighton plunged into the reading. According to Octavia's testimony, Thorne had been beating and raping her for months. That day, she finally decided to run away, but he caught her and beat her again. A medical examination confirmed bruises and injuries consistent with her story. Thorne denied it, claimed he hadn't seen his wife in days, that he had come home early to surprise her for their wedding anniversary. No one believed him. Wrighton went through the list of witnesses. Most were acquaintances and friends of Octavia's, confirming that she had seemed depressed in the last few months before the incident. One name caught his attention. Catherine Smith, Octavia's co-worker. She gave the most detailed testimony about Thorne's allegedly abusive behavior. The Catherine Smith Foundation for Victims of Abuse was the name of the charity Octavia ran. Coincidence? Wrighton decided to check. A quick database search revealed that Catherine Smith had died 15 years ago under mysterious circumstances. Her body had been found in a river. The death case had never been solved. Wrighton tapped his pen on the table. Something wasn't adding up here. He went back to the case file and scrutinized the medical reports. The doctor who had examined Octavia had indicated multiple bruises and signs of sexual assault. But there was one oddity. All the injuries looked too uniform, like they were inflicted with the same force. Usually in rape cases, the injuries vary in severity. He called Dr. Alice Chang. Alice, can you inflict rape-mimicking injuries on yourself? Theoretically, yes, Alice answered after a pause. Bruises can be made by pressing hard on the skin with a hard object. Microdamage to mucous membranes can be caused in a number of ways. But why do you ask? Just thinking out loud, Wrighton replied evasively. Thank you, Alice. Now he was curious. He asked his assistant to find and interview anyone who had known Octavia and Maverick Thorne during their marriage. By evening, Wrighton had the results of the interviews on his desk. Most of the people he knew described their marriage as quite happy, though not perfect. No one had noticed any signs of violence or Octavia's fear of her husband. Many were surprised by the allegations at the time. Especially interesting was the testimony of a former neighbor, Gertrude Lawson, who now lived in a nursing home. They seemed like a normal couple, she said. But a couple months before that incident, I noticed that she was seeing some young man a lot. They were sitting in a car not far from the house and clearly not just talking. I didn't say anything at the time, none of my business. But when her husband was accused, I thought it was a strange coincidence. Wrighton tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the file folder. He was beginning to form an alternate picture of events. What if Octavia wanted to leave her husband for another, but a simple divorce didn't suit her? A rape conviction guaranteed her sympathy, support, and probably all the jointly acquired property. He looked at the picture of Maverick Thorne, a bright-eyed young man who was about to spend 20 years in prison for a crime he might not have committed. Suddenly, Jason Clark came running into the office. Detective, we have a lead! A camera caught Hayes's car on the way out of town. He was driving it, and a man who looked like Thorne was in the passenger seat. They were heading toward Springville. Wrighton instantly pulled himself together. Get an extraction team up here. We move out immediately. 2 hours later, 5 unmarked police cars pulled into Springville. The local sheriff reported that Hayes's gray Ford had been spotted outside the Pine Grove Motel on the outskirts of town. An extraction team surrounded the motel. With a megaphone, Wrighton addressed the alleged perpetrators. Maverick Thorne, Griffin Hayes, you are surrounded. Come out with your hands up. Quiet. Come on up, Wrighton commanded the group. They burst into the room, kicking in the door, but it was empty. On the desk was a note. You're looking for the wrong person. Shit, Wrighton cursed. Scour the whole town. They couldn't have gotten far. The police had searched all of Springville, but Thorne and Hayes were nowhere to be found. It was like the ground had swallowed them up. Back at the department, Wrighton got the results of the blood and tissue tests found under Brock Sterling's fingernails. The DNA didn't belong to Thorne, Hayes, or anyone in the police database. "That's odd," Wrighton muttered. "If the killer isn't Thorne, who is?" The phone rang in his office. "Detective Wrighton," he answered. "I'm innocent," said a man's voice. "I didn't kill them." Wrighton signaled his assistant to run a trace on the call. "Maverick Thorne?" he asked calmly. "If you're innocent, why run?" "I don't have a choice. 20 years ago, I was already convicted of a crime I didn't commit. Do you think it will be different now? Surrender, and I promise a fair investigation." Bitter laughter on the other end of the line. "Justice? Do you believe in it, detective? I don't. Not after everything that's happened." "Why did Octavia lie about you?" Wrighton asked, trying to prolong the conversation. Pause. "She wanted to get rid of me. She was having an affair and wanted to leave, but she didn't want to share the property. Besides, my business was starting to flourish at the time. She knew I'd be rich soon." "Who was her lover?" "I don't know. I found out in prison from my lawyer. He found witnesses who saw her with a man, but it was too late." Wrighton looked at Jason, who gestured that the tracking was continuing. "Where is Griffin Hayes now?" the detective asked. "I'm not going to say." "He killed them, didn't he?" Wrighton ventured. "While you were thinking of how to get revenge, he did it for you." There was a long silence. Then, "I can't talk about it. Thorne, listen to me. If Hayes is the killer, you need to say it now. Otherwise, you're an accessory." "I got to go." "Wait!" Wrighton exclaimed. "I have reason to believe that the charge against you 20 years ago was trumped up. I can help you to prove your innocence, but you must surrender." Pause again. "Why do you believe me?" "Because the facts don't add up. The medical evidence looks, suspicious. And there are witnesses who saw Octavia with another man before she accused you. Can you really prove my innocence?" Thorne's voice sounded hopeful, mixed with disbelief. "I can't guarantee the outcome, but I will honestly investigate all the facts." Think about it," Thorne finally said. "I'll contact you." The connection was cut off. Jason said, "We didn't have time to trace it. The call went through several servers." Wrighton leaned back in his chair. He was almost certain that Thorne was innocent of both the murder and the rape, but he needed proof. The next few days passed in intense investigation. Wrighton found several more witnesses to corroborate Octavia's version of the affair. He also found out that Brock Sterling's life insurance policy was $2 million, and Octavia was the sole beneficiary. Another interesting fact was that Catherine Smith, a close friend of Octavia and the main witness against Thorne, shortly before her death, approached the lawyer with a desire to change her testimony. She claimed that she had lied under pressure from Octavia. A week afterward, her body was found in a river. "She killed her friend," Wrighton muttered, looking at the facts, "or organized the murder, and named the foundation after her. How ironic." Another discovery was information about Griffin Hayes. It turned out that he too had been convicted of rape, which allegedly occurred 27 years ago. The victim refused to testify in court, but there were witnesses who claimed to have seen the attack. The key witness was Octavia Baker, the future Thorne and Sterling. What the hell? Wrighton exhaled as he read this information. She testified against Hayes, and then her testimony sent her own husband to prison? Now the picture was starting to come together. Hayes had been convicted thanks to Octavia's testimony. She later used the same trick to get rid of her husband. Hayes, out of prison, somehow found out about this coincidence and decided to get revenge. Detective Leighton Wrighton hadn't slept for the second 24 hours. On the wall of his office hung a makeshift investigation board, photos of victims, suspects, witnesses, linked together by red threads. In the center was a photograph of Octavia Sterling, the woman who may have sent 2 innocent men to prison for years. Wrighton rubbed his eyes and took a sip of his now-cooled coffee. He'd almost managed to put together a complete picture. It had all started 27 years ago, when young Octavia Baker had been a key witness in a rape case against literature teacher Griffin Hayes. Then, 20 years ago, she accused her husband, Maverick Thorne, of rape. In a strange coincidence, the 2 men ended up in the same prison, became friends, and were released a month apart. "Detective, there's a call for you." Jason Clark peeked through the door. "Who's it from?" County court records. You requested the complete file on the Hayes case." Wrighton grabbed the phone. "Detective Wrighton. Hi, this is Deborah from the archives. We found the files you requested. And there's something interesting in them. There's a sealed envelope in the file marked, 'Open only on request of the court.' We can't open it without an order, but... But? It was opened by someone about a month ago. The visitor's log notes that McLean's paralegal handled the case." Wrighton frowned. Attorney McLean still practicing? Yes, office downtown. Thank you, Deborah. Send me what you can, the rest I'll request through the court. Rayton hung up the phone and grabbed his jacket. Jason, get me the address of McLean's lawyer. Half an hour later, Rayton was already sitting in the reception area of a respectable office. A gray-haired man of about 65 invited him into the office. What can I do for the police? The lawyer asked, pointing to a chair. Mr. McLean, a month ago, your assistant worked on the Griffin Hayes case file from 27 years ago. Why? McLean pressed his lips together. You know I'm not obligated to disclose information about my clients. Mr. McLean, this is a double homicide. I can get a warrant and bring you in to testify if necessary. The lawyer sighed. I was approached by Mr. Hayes about 3 months ago. He said he had just been released and wanted to review his case file. That's his legal right. It took my assistant a while to locate the records. What exactly was Hayes interested in? Witness statements, especially one Octavia Baker. He was very excited when he recognized her name. Said he knew it from a cellmate's story. Rayton stepped forward. What happened next? He asked us to see if the same woman was involved in the case of his friend, Maverick Thorne. My assistant checked and confirmed it was the same woman, only under her husband's last name. Rayton nodded. That confirmed his theory. Thank you, Mr. McLean. That's very valuable information. Back at the station, Rayton received a fax from the archives, a copy of Octavia Baker's testimony in the Hayes case. She claimed to have seen Hayes assault a girl in a park behind the university campus. In a strange coincidence, the victim herself didn't testify clearly, citing shock and poor lighting, but Octavia's words and a few pieces of circumstantial evidence were enough for a conviction. Jason, Rayton called out, see if you can find the alleged rape victim in the Hayes case. Lizzie Foster, she must be in her 50s by now. An hour later, Jason returned with the information. Elizabeth Foster, 52, lives in Portland, teaches high school. Here are her contacts. Rayton called immediately. Mrs. Foster, this is Detective Leighton Rayton of the River City Police Department. I'm investigating a case that may be related to an incident from 27 years ago when you were the victim of an assault. The woman on the other end of the line interrupted him. What kind of attack? What are you talking about? Rayton was confused. The Griffin Hayes case, 27 years ago. You were the victim. There was a long silence, then a quiet voice. Detective, I don't know why you're bringing this up now, but I need to clarify something. Griffin Hayes never assaulted me. What? But the court? The court convicted an innocent man. I tried to tell the truth, but Octavia, she was my best friend. She convinced me it was just a little payback for Hayes breaking up with her. She said he'd get probation or community service. I didn't know he'd be sentenced to 25 years. Did you try to make things right? Of course I did. I went to another lawyer and tried to change my testimony, but I was told I could be charged with perjury. I was young and scared. Then I moved, changed my number, tried to forget. And Octavia Baker? What was your relationship with her after that? Nothing. She disappeared from my life right after the trial. I heard she got married, then divorced. Did something happen to her? She was murdered, and there's reason to believe that Griffin Hayes may have been involved. Silence. Oh my God. I was always afraid something like this would happen. What do I do? I'm gonna need your official statement. Can you come to River City? Yeah. Yes, of course. I'll be at your place tomorrow. With the conversation over, Rayton exhaled. Now he had the full picture. Octavia Baker had sent 2 innocent men to prison. Hayes had found out about it after they were released and had decided to take revenge. But where were Hayes and Thorne now? The answer came unexpectedly. The duty officer handed Rayton a note. Call the number. They're waiting for you. MT. The number was from the Quiet Harbor Motel on the edge of town. Rayton took 2 officers and drove out there. The door of room 14 was ajar. Rayton entered with his pistol at the ready, but there was only one man in the room, Maverick Thorne. He was sitting on the bed, his hands placed defiantly in his lap. Glad you came, Detective, he said calmly. Where's Hayes? I don't know. He disappeared 2 days ago. Left a note saying he had some business to finish. I'm afraid he's going to do something irreparable. Rayton nodded to the officers and they handcuffed Thorne. You're under arrest for accessory to double murder and fleeing from justice. I understand. Thorne didn't resist. But believe me, I didn't kill them and I didn't know about Griffin's plans. I wanted revenge, but not like that. At the station, Rayton personally questioned Thorne. He told how he'd met Hayes in prison, how they'd supported each other over the years. When we got out, we started sharing stories. I told him about Octavia accusing me, showed him her picture. Griffin's face changed. He said he knew the woman, that she'd sent him to prison. I didn't believe it at first. I thought it was a coincidence. But he gave us the details and we realized it was the same Octavia. And you decided to take revenge on her? Wrighton asked. Yes, I wanted to, but not to kill her. I wanted her to confess publicly, to clear her name. We followed her, studied her daily routine. Griffin suggested we break into their house, record a conversation with her on a tape recorder, get her to confess. And then she and her husband were dead. I was home that night, I swear to you. Griffin said he had to go somewhere. He came back in the morning, acting all weird, and the next day we saw the news. Wrighton watched Thorne carefully. He spoke sincerely, without a trace of deceit. You realize you're an accomplice, even if you didn't kill them yourself? Thorne nodded. Yes, I realize that. But I want the truth of what Octavia did to come out. She ruined not only my life, but also Griffin's. And probably other men. Who knows how many more times she's used this scheme. Where could Hayes be right now? I don't know. I really don't. But he's got some unfinished business with Octavia. A few hours after Thorne's interview, Elizabeth Foster arrived at the station. She testified on the record that Griffin Hayes had never assaulted her, that the accusation had been fabricated at Octavia Baker's instigation. I've always had a guilty conscience, she told Wrighton, but I was too frightened to set things right. Now I'm ready to take responsibility for my actions. Back in his office, Wrighton found an envelope left on his desk. Inside was a flash drive and a note. The whole truth is here. GH. Wrighton plugged the flash drive into his computer. On it was a video confession from Griffin Hayes. I, Griffin Hayes, confess to the murder of Octavia and Brock Sterling. I acted alone. Maverick Thorne had no knowledge of my plans and was not involved in the murder. 27 years ago, Octavia Baker fabricated a rape charge against me because I had broken off a relationship with her. Her friend, Elizabeth Foster, agreed to come forward as a victim. I got 25 years in prison. In prison, I met Maverick Thorne, who had been convicted on a false rape charge against his wife, Octavia Thorne, née Baker, the same woman. When we were both released from prison, we decided to get her to confess to what she had done. I broke into their house the night of the murder. I just wanted to talk to her, record her confession. But when I confronted her, she recognized me. She started screaming. Her husband lunged at me. In the ensuing struggle, I hit him with the statue. He fell. Octavia tried to run away. I grabbed a kitchen knife. I regret Brock Sterling's death. He wasn't responsible for anything. But I'm not sorry about Octavia's death. She deserved her fate, taking decades of life from me and Maverick. It was retribution. If you're watching this video, I'm no longer alive. I'm not going to spend another 25 years in prison. I hope Maverick can start a new life. He is innocent, both of that long-ago accusation and of these murders. The video ended. Wrighton leaned back in his chair. He felt mixed emotions, the satisfaction of solving the case and the weight of realizing the tragedy that had played out before his eyes. Over the next 24 hours, the police found the body of Griffin Hayes in the woods near the city. He had killed himself with a gunshot to the head. Next to the body was a note that read, "Justice has been done. The investigation into the double murder has been completed." Thanks to Elizabeth Foster's testimony and Hayes' video confession, Maverick Thorne's case was retried. The court recognized that the 20-year-old charge was trumped up and formally acquitted him. However, he received a suspended sentence for complicity in planning revenge and fleeing from justice. A month after the formalities were completed, Wrighton met Thorne in a small cafe on the outskirts of the city. "How are you doing?" the detective asked, taking a seat at a table. Thorne looked different, trimmed, new clothes, a healthy color on his face. "Trying to start over, got a job with a construction company, got an apartment, small steps. Any regrets?" Thorne thought about it. "I regret letting revenge rule me. If I'd just gone to the police, to a good lawyer, maybe 2 people would still be alive, even if one of them deserved to be punished." "And Hayes? Do you understand him?" "I understand, but I don't excuse him," Thorne said quietly. 27 years in prison had broken him. He saw no other way out but retribution. I could have followed the same path. But you didn't. No, and I'm thankful for that. You know, Detective, sometimes I think justice is a luxury not everyone can afford. Wrighton looked out the window. It was a clear, sunny day. People were hurrying about their business, unaware of the dramas playing out around them. "I think justice is something we all strive for but rarely achieve," he replied. "In my work, I see too many cases where the guilty go unpunished and the innocent suffer. But sometimes the truth does come out. Even if it takes decades, even if it does." Thorne nodded. "You know what the ironic thing is? She built her career and reputation on lying about me, ran a foundation for victims of abuse she'd never experienced, and named it after a woman she may have sent to the other side of the world herself when she decided to tell the truth. Catherine Smith? Yes, she was the only one who knew the truth about what Octavia did, and when she decided to tell the truth, she had an accident. We'll never know for sure if Octavia was involved in her death, Wrighton remarked. Too much time has passed. Yes, you're probably right. Thorne finished his coffee. I have to go to work. Thanks for meeting me. Good luck to you, Mr. Thorne. I hope you find your way. And you'll find justice for others who need it. They shook hands, and Thorne left. Wrighton was alone at the table. He thought about justice, about retribution, about the fine line between the two, about how one lie could ruin several lives, and how sometimes the price of truth was too high. The next day, he received a request for a new case. Life went on, and somewhere out there was probably another victim waiting for justice. And he was willing to look for it, no matter what.